Welcome back to Bridge to Self. I'm your host, Ben Arthur. So, for today's episode, I have a compilation of the best soundbites and personal stories from my guests over the past 3 months or so, discussing identity, success, and purpose coming up as the children of Black immigrants. You'll be hearing from Saron Tedla, a medical school student in Oregon, Paul Faronbi, a chemical engineer and entrepreneur, and Kenneth Nti, who is an architecture designer and researcher. You'll be hearing from those folks in that order. Just wanted to put that out there for those of you tapping in via audio. And yeah, I hope you guys get a ton of value from this. Of course, the solo episodes and interviews will continue in the weeks moving forward, but thought today would be a good time to pause and resurface some of the best stuff that's been said on the show as of late. So without any further ado, let's go.
Working on fully accepting myself, both me feeling maybe not white enough for the spaces I'm in that are predominantly white, and
Mm,
also feeling not African enough in like spaces where it's like family functions and things like that, because I'm
yeah,
always feeling like I'm in the middle, and I don't
yeah,
think that's something that ever will go away completely. And so one thing I've been working on recently is just radically self-accepting both sides and being like, hey, like I'm not perfect. Like I'm not gonna fully understand the cultures of either side. Like I don't ski that much. I honestly don't hike that much, but I also don't understand every word in the Ethiopian language. Like I will be confused in conversations and
yeah.
like being okay with that, and it's like no one's perfect, and um just like being like, hey, y'all don't mess with me, that's cool, like I am who I am, like
Yeah.
both sides put together, and that's just what it is.
What are some of the steps you've tried to take to like radically accept yourself as you are, being someone who kind of sits between both worlds?
Sure. Like for the example of not understanding every word, I sometimes sit with my cousins sometimes when they like talk about some super niche like cultural thing that happened in Ethiopia or some meme, and I don't know what they're talking about, and I'm just like, oh, what's that? And just like being open about not knowing instead of silently sitting there and
Yeah.
kind of like not suffering, but just like feeling like, this is weird. Like I can't relate to y'all. Like I don't know. I'm just gonna zone out right now. Just like being actively trying to always learn and just being
Mm,
okay with not knowing anything. Usually, like feeling like you don't know anything, um, because it's like it's growth and it's just part of having fun with it too, and just being
yeah.
like, hey, like I'm learning something new. This is great. Like now next time I'll know how to talk about this thing, and just things like that, like being super open and not feeling too worried about what people think when it comes to not knowing something.
Did it take you a while to get to that point though? Like not maybe feeling embarrassed about having to ask those extra questions, or do you think maybe that's come more natural?
I would say it's still hard.
Yeah,
I feel
I feel
embarrassed
you.
sometimes, definitely. And I think that's just part of working on it is being cool with it. Because yeah, it can be kind of embarrassing when my cousins clown on me when they're like, oh, you don't know what this is? Like, but it's just like, yeah, I don't know. And tell me. And I'm from here. Like, and
Yeah.
what? Just being like, whatever. It is what it is. Yeah, this is part of it.
There's obviously a certain culture that comes with like if you're just like kind of African American. So how have you how have you connected or maybe felt a disconnect in any way with your kind of your Black American peers, knowing that you are like second gen Ethiopian?
Totally. I think that's a great question. There's always just been that, sort of divide, right, with Africans versus African Americans, and it's just like at the end of the day, we're all black, and I think even in 2020, like everything with George Floyd and everything that happened, it was just I think that kind of was a shift for me, and it made me realize like, hey, if you're in a car and you're black, the police are going to pull you over if you're Ethiopian, if you're Black American, if you're Kenyan, if you're whatever. And it's just like how you look. And I think a lot of people also kind of had that realization. And I feel like since then, I've also felt more of a connect with African Americans. I don't think I've ever really struggled with um, connecting with African Americans. I feel like I identify as one. So
Hmm.
it doesn't really, I don't think that's something I necessarily struggle with. But at the same time, I do see that some of my character can sometimes feel a little too African. Um, like just in terms of feeling, I don't know how to describe it, honestly, but I think maybe it goes back to how that super humble like feeling of just like being super quiet, super not as open and
Mm.
more closed in. I think that can sometimes be an African trait, and I don't know, but at least it is for me. And
Yeah.
I think that that can kind of make me feel a little different. But yeah, I think that that would be my struggle, I think. Um, but I remember I think it was in middle school, I wrote a poem about feeling too African and not feeling enough of like not feeling like I was Black American. And
Mm.
I honestly, I don't even remember what I wrote, but I remember I was just like so passionate about it because I think at the time this was in California, so
Mm.
I was around a lot of people who looked like me. And I think being surrounded by that, I was more hyper aware of the fact that I had like more of an African side than just
Yeah.
African American. And so, yeah, I notice it, but it's also beautiful because, we're all like an amalgamation of things and we all just share different cultures and learn from each other. Yeah, so I think it's great.
What were the maybe the cultural expectations that you faced, whether they were explicitly said to you by your parents or maybe just unsaid, just kind of expected, right? Like just indicated um to you, like just being in an Ethiopian household. Um and I guess maybe how have you dealt with that as you've gotten older, or has that even required any dealing with from like just from your perspective?
Yeah, so as an Ethiopian growing up, I guess this is like African culture in general. It's like choosing a career, being a doctor, a lawyer, or like an engineer. It's I've been lucky where I feel like my parents haven't necessarily been like, you need to be one of those. Um, and I feel lucky that I kind of chose this profession on my own, but at the same time, in the back of my mind, I'm always trying to make sure that I didn't decide to be a doctor for my parents. As much as I want to make them proud, I
Yeah.
think it's important to always take into consideration, like at the end of the day, you're alone with yourself and all the sacrifices you've made, all the hard work you've put into something, only you will look back and say, hey, I am proud of this, or oh man, I wasted my time trying to please other people. I think the biggest thing for me growing up was trying to find my purpose outside of my identity as an only child, the first and only daughter of
Mm.
an immigrant family, and trying to remove myself from that while also recognizing it so that I
Yeah.
don't have regrets in the future about how I spent my life.
What is that process of making sure that you are doing it for yourself? Is it journaling? Is it meditation? Like how do you go about deciphering that?
Honestly, it's a lot of prayer. I feel like and journaling. I guess I don't really journal, but I kind of just think to myself. Maybe it's meditation. Um, just really reflecting, taking time sometimes to sit back and be like, am I really doing this for myself or not? Especially when it gets hard. I think that's really when you start thinking like, man, is this worth it? Like, is this worth doing the work for? Like I know for me, when it comes to different research projects, because I do a lot of research in medical school, so like with that comes along working with many different types of people. And sometimes that can be pretty difficult. I don't um, necessarily feel like everyone is super easy all the time to work with. And
Yeah.
so sometimes, just thinking about like, I guess, I don't know, I guess I'm just like, I like to reflect and think, hey, is this something that I really want to invest my time into for like a project or for something that some physician wants me to help them with? And because, there's only so much time you have in a day, and as much as you want to like do as much as you can to, do whatever you're passionate about, I think it's like important to reflect sometimes and just be like, okay, do I actually want to do this? Um, is this worth my time? But again, that's not really easy to do all the time. Like, especially when you're busy all the time, when you have things to do, it's easy to get lost in like everyday work, and like the everyday flow of things. So it's something I'm still working on.
When you go through that, when you do have time to go through that process, right? Whether the reflection or the prayer, what is that answer that you keep like what is the inspiration behind like wanting to be a doctor? Like what is that purpose you keep finding yourself coming back to that reaffirms that you're on the right track?
So it was actually an experience I had in Ethiopia about a few months before I started medical school. I had the chance to go to Ethiopia for 2 months. It was the longest time I've ever been there.
Mm.
And I had the chance to shadow and volunteer slash work at an eye clinic. And I've never really done that there. I've always just like been with family the few times that I visited before. So this was the first time I was like in the workspace, like a healthcare workspace in Ethiopia, and just seeing it for what it was. And I think that really changed some things for me. I saw patients that had cataracts that were like so intense, like the type that you don't see here because there's less care there, and so sometimes it gets so bad. And just watching them after they have their surgery, which is pretty quick, and then they have like 1 or 2 days, or a few days, and then they get to take off their like bandages on their eye, and they can like see for the first time, going from seeing like almost legally blind to 20/20, and just seeing their reaction is just like it's so rewarding to be able to just witness some experience like that from someone else, having a patient like jump into the arms of a doctor and just like so happy and overwhelmed. Mind you, these patients are coming from different parts of the country or different parts of Africa. So they don't even necessarily speak Amharic or any Ethiopian language, but
Mm.
like it like surpasses any language barriers because you can see the joy in their face. And I think like going back to that moment really makes me remember why I'm doing what I'm doing. I want to be able to do ophthalmology in the future and be able to go back to Ethiopia and be able to do things like this and have that reaction hopefully in the future and just be able to make a difference for my people there. So yeah, I think that's what I come back to a lot.
How has the way you've looked at your Nigerian heritage evolved as you've come into yourself more as a young adult?
I would say it's evolved a lot because at the beginning, very much so, like born in Nigeria group, was there up until like right before starting kindergarten. Then being really immersed into American culture, but being raised in Nigerian household.
Yeah.
So trying to make sense of the two because like my parents are experiencing America for the first time. I'm experiencing it for the first time. And so there's certain things they don't know. And I think as I was growing up in elementary school and middle school, I just wanted to blend in. I didn't want people to know I was different, even though I was clearly different. And so that was something. that didn't shift until when I was in college and started to embrace being Nigerian a little bit more. I think from joining things like the African Student Association, and then just a lot the nature of a lot of the engineers that I got connected with were also African, a lot of them Nigerians, just because
Mhm.
that running stereotype.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I think now over the last few years is really I embracing my culture, but in my own sense, because and
Mm.
my siblings and I we joke about this, and I think well, everything that you talk about with 1.5 and second generation Americans will probably understand. Black Americans will understand this as well. Is that we very much exist between the two cultures. So we are too Nigerian for Americans, and we're too American for Nigerians.
Yeah.
So we don't quite fit in either way. And I think it's more so just accepting that I am different and embracing those differences. And I think a lot of times I just see things in a different way. I don't, and it's hard to put in words unless it's like a specific situation, but I don't see things the way everyone else sees things for the most part.
How have you tried, Paul, if at all, to carry your Nigerian heritage with you in your day to day as either an engineer or within Credipol, Knowledge STEM? Like, how is that a part of your daily life or work life?
I would say it's a part of it, but not directly. So I think I tried to balance between the two because there was a time that I actually like changed my name on LinkedIn to be like
I
my
do remember that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So it's like my middle name is actually my birth name, but it has nothing to do with Paul. It was just like really confusing, and then I got
Mm.
paranoid about like what if someone tries to steal my identity because they know like all my different names. So like I took it off, and it
Mm-mm.
was so right now, and it's also because the audience that I attract is not specifically Nigerian American or second gen immigrants or so. I definitely relate well to them. Anytime I'm doing speaking or in person, introducing myself, I tell people that I'm Nigerian American, but across my platforms, you won't. It's not something that's at the forefront, and and maybe I honestly don't know. I couldn't tell you why I don't put it more at the forefront. I think more so because yes, I'm Nigerian, yes, I'm American. I'm a unique blend of both. I really just focus more on what I bring to the table as
Mhm.
opposed to what either of those countries or demographics bring.
We're getting to the point where we can kind of understand exactly what our parents were trying to do at the same age, because this is roughly around the time that they made that big jump or that big move. And so, more importantly, I think keeping that in mind, I realize that there are a lot of natural things that you can do on a day to day that help keep some of those things alive. Things like music or food, right? That's really easy. It's very consumable. And then I think there are more hard hitting things like language, which could be a really big factor. Um, and then I think moving forward, I realize that there's a lot of power to understand what you want to pull from each aspect of your life experience. And so finding out the things that I can do to remember and pass those down have really started to hit home as I'm getting older. So like I think having more one-on-one conversations with my grandparents and just trying to understand like what they were going through around that time period that they were growing up, it's very significant because when you look at a timeline, you start to realize that although they may have been in their home country, this may have aligned with this historical event that happened in America. And so you can start to picture exactly how things may have been drastically different or similar. Um, and then I think from there, it's also just like understanding that, you have a different path or journey that you're on. Um, and you can incorporate a lot of what you're actively seeing now along with the things that you've been taught by your parents. So with that sort of being said, um, there's this thing that I've been trying to do lately where I take some time, at least one day of the week, like on a Sunday, and I do like a voice recording to talk about how my week went. But I try to be fairly thorough and really talk about, maybe the ups and downs and things that were challenging. Because I knew that, growing up, it was a very community-based experience. People talk about, being raised by a village, and I think that means a lot because your parents can be there to support you and provide you with everything that you need. But if you don't have the resource directly in front of you, then there's always someone else around you that can also help you support. And so with that being said, I think there was always a way to get to the same conclusion, but more of like a conglomerate way. And I'm hoping that through my experience, there might be a more direct connection, more so with my kid, because not only did I get to experience things with my parents as they were finding their way in a new country, trying to build a life, but I'm also actively living in a world where, I'm witnessing firsthand things that they may have not seen. And so that's all going to be vital information for my kids in the future. I think being able to offer both of those things to my kid, in a very like passive way through my parents telling me, but also me sort of testing some of those things that they may have told me, and then sort of understanding in real time what adjustments need to be made, is a really informative way of sort of sharing that. And so that's what those voice recordings are for. They could be about, what were things like looking for different jobs, or, what was this music festival like that I went to, or, what happened the day that I turned 30, like things of that nature. I think being able to just talk about little things, but also just remind them that you're human, at a time where they may not be able to either understand what you're saying at a young age, or you just may be a little bit too old for them to actually listen. I think having that proof, might be a really helpful way, and something that I kind of just thought of as, it would have been nice to get more of these from my parents, even though I still have the one-on-one conversations. But now I can leave the one-on-one conversations and eventually start to take it from a different angle.
What maybe led to that aha, like this is an important way for me to document what's going on in real time?
Yeah. I was thinking of ease. So just being able to do something quick, fast, that I knew no matter what would happen throughout the week, I would always have time for. And then another was, as I was conducting research, I think I was in Copenhagen trying to find a barbershop to get a haircut. And I randomly went to a shop and I met a man who was also like first gen, except he was from Egypt. While he was cutting my hair, he was basically telling me how he moved there when he was, roughly 19 or 20. He saved up some money and bought the barbershop. But then he also started talking about like his actual life experiences in terms of like maybe his concerns for the future for his kids. Being a little bit worried that they may not remember the original country that he had come from. I think actively witnessing how his kids had to really put themselves in a new environment in order to adjust because of this move that he had made. And I think I was recording myself walking through town and completely forgot to stop recording. So by the time I sat in the barbershop, I now recorded this full 45-minute conversation that I was having with him. And it was a really good exchange, and it happened naturally because, someone from across the world just flew to your country and randomly stumbled upon your barbershop. So you're just as curious as I am when I'm navigating this city, trying to understand more about it. So ironically, just seeing someone who'd taken a very similar path to my parents I think gave me an avenue to start asking some of these questions in terms of like his concerns, what makes him happy, the opportunities that he's had. And he gave me a very like clear, blunt response for each question. And then more importantly, I think he was sort of happy and also laughing at the fact that I caught the recording, because he felt like it was a really good conversation to have. He'd never really had anybody ask him that series of questions before. And so it was a really good takeaway. And I think it started to influence the way that I wanted to look at just the overall experience about being in a different country, because that's sort of the closest thing for the moment that I can sort of understand with my parents in terms of coming here and making adjustments and having to go out and find these things that you need, and just hoping that you can find everything.
You were saying like your life is like almost like this track, so to speak, like track in terms of track and field, and like your parents being the like coming to the US from Ghana, them being the sprinters in a relay. But you were saying that you don't feel like you're the person receiving the baton to keep going and keep running. You feel like you're the baton itself, which I think is super deep. But what exactly did you mean by that?
You hit on this earlier, and I think it's the fact that you still have that connection to where your parents are from. You're almost the remnants of who your parents are. And because of that, I think the concern that you have for the next generation, that the kids you're going to raise, right? They're going to have that complete disconnection, right? Like you're raising them. You're not necessarily your parents because you didn't grow up back home.
Yeah.
You're this new production of your parents. And with that, I think you can completely change the game. I think you matter just as equally, but just in a different way. And so you fall short, then that changes the outcome. Or if you succeed and find the jewels that your parents have been trying to dig for, then now your kids can run away with something way more valuable. And so I kind of just see it as like being that step towards the true success. I think there's a very common like goal for a lot of families that move here is to, grant their kids an opportunity to have a very ambitious hobby or job that makes them happy. And with that, the return allows them to sort of bypass the struggle that comes with being that first generation. And so with all the tips, the valuable lessons, the voice recordings, the videos, they can hopefully hit the ground running a whole lot faster than you did, because you had to sort of take half and half. So it's really up to you to figure out how you can just, mold this culture, this identity that you have into something that maybe weighs a little bit less and makes it a whole lot easier for them to just keep running with whatever your parents started with. You can still get to the finish line, but if you don't have the baton, then technically you're disqualified, correct? So I think that always reinstitutes the value of how each piece is still important. But I think the pass and the handoff, that connection, right? That's really up to the person. So whether it's the stories, the food, the language, in some way, the way that your kids receive that is based on your responses to it.
Yeah.
So if you feel like, oh, like growing up, this is my favorite meal, then I feel like that aspect of you having that joy and happiness of it is always going to constantly notify your kids like, oh, like this is what my dad eats all the time.
Yeah.
Um, And then I think there are things that will still find their way and trickle down to your kids. Um, and they may never have to come across through you. I think that's that idea of the relay team, is that you're still a team at the end of the day. So the relationship between the first runner and the second runner is still there. But I think in order to efficiently get the job done, understanding what you feel like is important in terms of establishing your own identity, but also maybe preserving those before you and trying to help shape a bigger and brighter identity for the one that's ahead of you, kind of reinstitutes why that connection between the two people being the baton is so important. You just have firsthand exposure to whatever that original identity was. And so I think, yeah, I think that was like the rough way of kind of viewing it at the time, because I knew that going through a lot of these challenges or pitfalls that you were talking about, I'm actively feeling like I don't have the answers. I don't have the solutions. And so hopefully that isn't another wall that my kids would have to bump into, because I'd be there to kind of coach them through some of these experiences. And it sort of, in some degree, it shows itself early. Like, I feel like even being an older sibling, there's a little bit of that there, where you're navigating things in life. You understand, like, oh, I tried that, it didn't really work, or oh, I tried that, I wasted a lot of time. And now I can relay that to my brother and just kind of let him know, like, if this is something that you're trying to explore or something that you're starting to understand doesn't make any sense, this may be the reason. So just pay attention. And I think just not necessarily telling him what to do, but telling him to be mindful of what the landscape looks like allows him to really look at things the right way and choose how he wants to navigate it, compared to me not really having a clue when I first stepped out there.
Yeah. So through those bumps that you've been through, like in your being in your own journey of figuring it out, what have been some ways that you've learned that have worked in terms of maybe dealing with that balance and in finding yourself within kind of that strange nuanced space that we find ourselves in? What has worked for you in the pain?
Continuing to ask questions is a big part. I think accepting that life, you'll never stop learning. And more importantly, I think finding mentors in those spaces that that might be a little bit more foreign to people in your community who can do the best they can to help. But at some point professionally, you may have to find someone who may have followed the same exact path that you have, or at least knows what that challenge looks like in hindsight. Yeah, and I think more importantly, I think looking at all of that and understanding that each of these, I think each of these experiences bring a set of challenges, and a lot of these challenges are achievable. But more importantly, what you do afterwards is important. So like, I think understanding that one day you're going to have to be the person that you were looking for when you were growing up is a really big aspect of anything that you choose to pursue in the future. You know how it feels. You know exactly what hurdles and blocks you came across. You understand how frustrating it can be. So just being that voice for someone goes a really long way. I think it starts to change the way that you look at a number of fields where representation is sort of like shifted or grown in multiple directions. A lot of that comes with the fact that someone saw you do something that they may have had an idea in the back of the mind that they may have wanted to do. And by seeing you and asking you questions, you kind of encouraged that pursuit for them. There's time and space where people that feel like-minded with those experiences that you talked about can sort of actually coexist together. And I only say that because I think of, the closest long-standing relationship that I have with some of my friends. And a lot of that is because, each of us came from various cultural backgrounds, but all of us were first gen, and all of us came South America, Europe, Africa, Asia. And I think all of us understanding that we're just kind of all navigating this world at the same time. And we have questions that maybe our parents can't necessarily answer, or we understand how much we differ from what would be the majority of people in various groups. I think that allowed us to form a friendship of our own, which kind of ties back in with that point I made about, like, once you realize that, there are a number of minorities in a room, that minority might end up becoming the majority, because some foreign experience that you feel like you may have been venturing on your own may be a shared experience, although it may not look like from the outside that two people can be similar. And so, there were a lot of ups and downs of understanding I might be the only one. But the more that I started, sitting down in a conversation, or just being like the residual person that's left out of the group, right? Enough of the residual people being left out of the group, I think, creates a newfound confidence within all the people that were left over. They realize, like, that's totally fine, right? But I feel like all of us understand what it feels like to be left out. And
Yeah.
because of that, now we've formed our own group. And so, I think trying to remain positive is a really big part of it. And recognizing that things like sharing stories is a really big aspect, because if it's not directly, it's passively. And even passively, people can start to pick up on the customs, the jewels that you find to be significant within your culture and identity. And you'll realize very quickly that you're no longer standing alone. You're standing with other people that you can share this with.